Welcome to Architects Edge Live August/July edition because we skipped July so we could arrange this special session for you guys. All right, so we've got once we hit 100 people have answered how they plan to adopt VCF 9, we'll kick off into the next meat of things and the other poll. And I'm gonna get ready to start the slide thingy. Then I'm gonna go through some slide stuff, but we're also it's gonna be a lot of talky talk. Definitely a lot of talk. Oh, look at you, Wesley. You're looking like a rock star. So part of that is I'm going to kick off this slide, kick it off into presentation mode. You guys should see it looking like a thing should look. Looks good, you guys? And I love it. So my name is Christopher Cusack. I am the MC of Architects Edge Live. If you are not subscribed to the newsletter, go click on the resources tab. It should be in there. A lot of other things, but we're going to take this moment to introduce Wesley. Introduce yourself, as you are one of our panelists for today.
Yeah, I've been with VMware 3 years. I'm a specialist for automation and management, and work side by side with Christopher. And so I'm going to inject some of the hard lessons I've learned through labbing with this new VCF 9 architecture along the way. We'll let Christopher drive, but you'll hear from me.
Wesley has done all of the hard work that you guys want, most of which I won't let him talk about. Man, he's done so much work. It's absolutely amazing. I'm a big fan of it. Don, our extra special guest today. You guys know him from our automation session back in March into automation. But Don, introduce yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Christopher, for having me back. Don Horrocks, I'm a systems engineer for Moffitt Cancer Center based out of Tampa, Florida. I'm a customer, just like many of you, and about to, embark on our VCF journey and transitioning from a traditional vSphere environment and most likely looking at a Greenfield VCF 9 implementation in the coming months.
I love it. Brian, are you able to share the other poll? I'm gonna Zoom loves to lock up my screen, so I lost the ability to get rid of the button out of the screen for me.
I will be honest with you, I don't know.
No, I found it. I found it.
Okay.
It's because I was on a different screen there. So I don't know if you guys saw these. These are the results of your answers, which I love. About 30% of you are looking at Greenfield, 46% Brownfield, and yeah, VxRail, right? Wait and see. If you're wondering about VxRail, I A, have an article out there, and B, we'll have an update article when that story changes as well. I am going to kick off our other poll as soon as I can figure out where the polling button is. There's polls. Back, and this is a very special one. We're going to click this. If I can get this thing to work. Nope, I can't seem. The poll is being shared in this meeting. The poll. Oh, hi. I don't know how to clear the poll results. Oh, there we are. There we go. Sorry about that. All right. Here's this poll, and now I'm going to get kicked off into the meat of things. There we go. I'll leave this over to the side. So welcome. We're going to talk about VCF 9, real life, real architectures, real upgrades, real customers done, others, and such like that. So but before we get into the meat of that upgrade process, any of you who have VCF today, had it in the past, acquired it recently, or anything like that, you guys, if you've never seen the welcome guide, most of you have probably never seen the welcome guide. Should have a poll. Have you seen the welcome guide? This is an amazing asset that you are A, entitled to, and B, you can access. So if one of you or don't have this tool, feel free to say, hey, where's the welcome guide? And what I like about the welcome guide is it tries to address all of the things. We're not going to go deep into each of these pieces, but we're going to kind of highlight, hey, this is what's in VCF. You're like, oh, I know that because I've read William Lamb's blog or I've seen other pieces on it, but it goes a little deeper. What's some of my use cases and functions on it? How do, what are advanced services on it? How do I prepare for this? I'm gonna go watch a video with this guy and his amazing beard, right? How do I get my profile set up if I do or don't have the stuff set up, or I've got to go make some changes inside my site ID, right? What does licensing look like and all these processes? What I love about this is It's not about, hey, where do I find that thing? It's literally right there at your fingertips. It makes it easy for you to find those things, how to open a support case, all the kind of things that we've always expected or we created our own document for that may have changed, all, documented and detailed in one place, right? So it's what's the process I go to do the thing? What's nice about this is it provides all that available to you. I'll throw this as a question for the chat. How many of you knew that you gain access to all the digital learning, on demand, guided labs, hands-on labs, of course, and you have access to the instructor-led training and the VCF experience. So if you wanted to do, I don't know, the new VCF 9 architecture class that's currently in beta that will be out soon, if you wanted to do that class, you're entitled to it. You just go through and boom, all those things are available at your fingertips. So, and you could just click list all classes and go able to see what classes you register for. All that stuff that used to be separate, separate entitlement, something separately you paid for, etc., are now all available and easily clickable through here. If you get VCF certified, you get Homeland licenses, and you also have that ability through vMug Advantage for everyone who's vMug Advantage out there as well. There's just a lot of stuff, again, all at your fingertips. If you got a TAM, how you can use your TAM better. If you don't have a TAM or want one, hey, what does a TAM involve? Where and how you should use professional services. Is this a build out slide? That was a build out slide. And then single click access to all of those direct resources and such like that. So as we kind of kick right into it, we go into overview paths of VCF 9. I'm going to leave that poll up running for some time because it does allow you to type a lot of words in there.
And Christopher,
Yes.
where can everyone find this this quick start guide that we're
That welcome guide?
The welcome guide, yes, sir.
I don't know at the moment, but if any of you said, where can I find the welcome guide? I'll make sure we can make it accessible. Normally, you would get it from your account team at deal closure. And that particular welcome guide was released on June 17th at the VCF 9 release. So if you haven't seen it ever before, you definitely would not have seen it before June 17th anyway. There was a version, but it was updated and it was pulled back and released for June 17th. So if any of you want it or want to see it, we can make sure that you can get it on in your fingertips, basically. So absolutely amazing tool, especially if Don, you have it because I gave you the deck, but and anybody, all the slides we're going over today, one, this is recording, so you can always go back and watch the slides. But two, you can have access to the PDF of the slides. All right, let's get to the meat of overview of the paths to VCF 9, right? There's a lot of different ways I forgot this was a build out slide. That's fine. The options really are there's deploy, converge, the word of which may change in the future. We may change the term of converge, and upgrade, right? This and then import, right? But there's many different paths to get there. So we're gonna take a step back here for a moment. If this were VCF 5 and earlier, your paths were Greenfield, or you are already running VCF 4 and you were doing the process that upgraded you from 4 to 5. That's so prior to 5 and portions of 5.2 except for when we introduced Brownfield ingestion 5.2, right? Like last November, basically. So in this case, you can deploy brand new, absolutely, which we're going to talk about in these coming slides. But you also can be like, I want to convert an existing environment, or I'd like to upgrade an environment, or I'd like to import an existing vSphere 8 update 1 or higher version, which you find in an article I have on that. So it gives you the gist of how you can actually go about adopting these things. So if I'm installing brand new, I'm going VCF installer, right? Because I'm using VCF installer for that, which in the past it was Cloud Builder, which was it wasn't like renamed, it was removed and recreated from scratch, right? I have the option through VCF operations, which we'll talk about. And then we have I actually don't even know why it says work consistency there, but that's fine. That's on me, right? But we can maintain consistency inside the environment. So this is a really fun part. You go inside VCF installer, that former Cloud Builder, and you go here, and which Wesley will speak to at great length, especially if we allow him. You go to the deployment wizard and be like, I would like to deploy VCF. And there you go. Like that kicks you off on a journey. So real talk on it is if you do this same process with Cloud Builder in 5.2 today, you're saying, you know what? I don't want to up 9. 5.2 is out. It's been out for a year plus. I want to deploy 5.2. You go, I'd like to do the same thing. You get was it a 500 line spreadsheet? You fill out information in, and then you do the thing. That's because that's what it is. This is not a 500 line step, so it makes it much easier whether you're having it as the deployment execution engine or to generate out a JSON for your modify manipulation and such like that. Thus, easy to replicate and scale with JSON like that line there. So you get a lot of power through that little installer on how you go about doing your initial deployment and additional deployments. Well, that sounded smooth. All right, let's talk about converging a little bit though. There are certain rules around convergence. There are certain requirements. There is a must be running vSphere version 9. Here's that little caveat. Only the management cluster needs to be running vSphere version 9. The minimum supported version is for 8, update 1A and later. So again, refer to the documentation and guidance on that, as well as articles I publish on it, because it does allow the nuance of how I can adopt this, how I can deploy this and such like that. Thus, I can have workload domains that are running 8, but if I'm going to do a VCF 9 with a management domain, that first management domain will be running 9, but kind of the nuance that kind of falls into it. Obviously, everything requires that vCenter to be 9 in order to do 9 related stuff. Again, we get into some of the details on that as well, right? So some of the meat on some of these things, you must have vSphere distributed switches on there. You're saying I can't do standard switches? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You can't do standard switches for the pieces that are you laughing at me, Don? So for those
No, I am just as enthusiastic as you. I know there's people's heads exploding as you said
Yeah.
that statement. So,
All
yes.
right, so a couple things, and I reiterate these points multiple times over the next couple of slides. Cannot be Elm. Elm is deprecated, but I talk about where it is. Cannot be registered with NSX. There's some specific, and you're like, wait a minute, what? Yes, because we're talking about converging versus the other paths. There's certain nuances and rules around NSX and what supported versions of NSX you can be running. So if you were running like 4.2.1.2 or something like that, you'd have to downgrade it to the supported version or something along those lines. And then that at this time cannot be VxRail managed, right? Because VxRail at this time doesn't support Brownfield, but it also doesn't support Greenfield at this moment because VxRail doesn't support 9 yet. Give it 30, 60 days or whatever. Again, I got an article on that. That might actually be in the resources tab. This is an important part. You guys have all heard about fleet management, right? Fleet management is the juice that lets me manage and lifecycle all the things. It's fleet management is the replacement for VUM and VLCM and VRLCM and ASLCM and all those pieces. And yes, it is, but any of the fleet management abilities you get inside of VCF 9 does require vCenter 9 and it does require vSphere 9. So you'll note some of these pieces on there, there'll be different nuance of which pieces you're able to manage out that. But once you deploy fleet and ops 9 respectively, which we get deeper in later slides, you can use that to install or upgrade all of the things. Again, we'll kind of cover that, shortly. And once I stop talking, I'll be furiously answering all of your questions in the Q&A and chat as well. I hope others are doing that. Be sure to ask some of your questions in the Q&A. All right, so and then converging existing infrastructure to the VCF management domain. There is a process for that. Make sure you follow that process, but that process requires those components must be running on. There's certain nuance of it, of which, if I recall, the steps involving this, if you go to the new VCF 9 deployment guide, it is pages 1111 through 1385, I believe is it. And nonetheless, there's deep intrinsic documentation, and that is inside of the 8,245 page all of the things document. Again, that's my latest newsletter has the links for all these things as well. And don't confuse the VCF installer Converge to using the import with a vSphere instance. Yeah, that's that little, I forgot this was a build out slide, right? So it makes it easier. This is a fun part. If you go inside of ops, you go inside of inventory, you go over there to actions. You could say, hey, I'd like to create a new workload domain. Hey, I'd like to import a vCenter. That functionality is right there inside the product. And I'm a big fan of it because it's right there inside the product. And it goes and does some of the things. And again, different attributes of how it can kind of apply, right?
By the way, let's just call something out there real quick, Christopher. So what's the difference between importing a vCenter and integrating a vCenter? So historically in ops, when you go into the administration tab and you try to, if you want to be able to bring the metrics coming out of a particular vCenter, you just integrate it. You don't import it, you integrate it. You just hand it the IP address and it starts to bring in stuff. The difference with import is the VCF architecture, and it's that once you import it, it's not being lifecycle managed by the fleet manager, X ARIA lifecycle manager. So all the binaries, the update,
/ SDDC manager, yeah, all of those pieces, yeah.
certificates, VIDM, all of that you get when you import it. So just want to call that out.
Oh, absolutely. And to add to that call out, so what you're saying is I can import a vSphere-9 vCenter. Sorry, I can. Yes, obviously I can.
Right,
I can import a vSphere-7 vCenter and still manage those vSphere-7 until October 2nd. I can still do that. Yes. I can import an 8 vCenter that's running, has 8 and 7 hosts under it. Yes. I can import a 9 vCenter that's running 9, 8, and 7 hosts under it. Also, yes. So you've got that flexibility. We're not saying, hey, you must be running, everything has to be 9. You can still support that 7 and 8 environment. I hope you guys you're getting that 7 environment upgraded, because October 2nd is coming soon. This is not a preach on the end of support of vSphere-7, but the end of support of vSphere-7 is coming October 2nd. So get off that if you can. So yeah, this is useful for importing that vCenter and also expanding or adding other pieces like that. And then different, where that comes really useful is there's certain stuff that's not supported by default inside of any of these imports or migration or etc. Right? So if you're saying like, oh, I want to do iSCSI, oh, you can't import that as a primary storage type. But so you cannot deploy it fresh as an iSCSI storage type. But if I stood it up initially and then imported it, it's okay. So yeah, there's a number of different nuance of where you import if you're trying to deviate from a principal level of configuration or something along those lines. All right. Let's talk about some complexities. These ones, I'll go through them fast because they're 3 slides that look very similar. So it's real simple. You can upgrade 8. Right? So 801 and higher. Yes. Refer to your compatibility guide, right? These are some of the things that make upgrading from 8 to 9 difficult. So that's why we kind of call them out. If you've got custom workflows, hey, you're going to either adapt those things or deviate from it. Or if you run into too many complexities in here, that may force you into a greenfield deployment where you got new hardware or evacuated hardware that you're installing brand new on. So just kind of note that nuance. If you're running prior to 5.0 VCF, yeah, look at your options, talk to your team, because that's a whole separate conversation. The key is if you're running 5 or greater, it makes it much easier. Right. If you have things that are doing custom calls, custom API calls and automation, hey, that could cause yourself a problem. If you've got Elm, but again, read all this nuance of it, of how you actually go adopt the Elm types of things. If you're running multiple VROPS instances, those VCF operations instances, you want to kind of account for that or how you address it. If you're running LCM, different flexibility there. If you're doing special stuff inside of VIDM that gets replaced with VIDB, you'll kind of want to account for that. And if you're running VxRail, again, you can't do VxRail yet today, but eventually we get our Greenfield answer. Maybe Brownfield, but eventually we get our Greenfield answer. So these are some of the complexities associated with an upgrade. These are some more things, just general knowledge. Hey, take a look at what's deprecated, make sure it's supported. Take a look at what items are removed. So you might be saying, wait, what did you do to Elm over here? And like, what did you do to this piece? And I say, oh, I got a slide that kind of covers that. Hey, I took care of this in Elm and I rolled them to this piece. Hey, you got rid of host profiles. Yeah, but now they're vSphere config profiles. Or you got rid of SDDC manager, the UI and the API. Yeah, but now you're doing that in the ops fleet manager. So I like having these 3 slightly duplicative slides just because they represent that information in a kind of really fun and useful way. All right, I am rolling here to some upgrade paths because I want to get to the Don and Wesley show as fast as I possibly can. this at a high level, this is your installation journey, right? Deploy the installer, deploy fleet management, deploy operations. 9's kind of deployed, and then I do the rest of the pieces, right? But we get into the meat on that. The reality is, how many of you are doing a non-VCF adoption? So I start with that. Hey, I'm running vSphere, vCenter, and VROPS. Like that's the reality. Like, hey, I'm running those three. What does the path look like for me? Right? It's like, oh, I'm running ARIA operations 8.18.3, at least. I forget if 4 came out, but I'm running at least 8.18.3. Great. I'm going to deploy fleet management, the VCF entitlement. I upgrade my ops, right? The first thing I did is upgrade to operations 9. And then I do the rest of these pieces. And at that point, I then start to deploy these pieces. If I didn't have automation, if I didn't have Verni, ops for networks, if I didn't have logs, if I did have logs, if I was ops plus logs, I'm still redeploying logs. If I didn't have automation, I likely didn't have VIDM, so I'm deploying VIDB, directly at that point. And after which point, then I launch to the installer and do the update. This is a non-VCF vSphere plus VROPS world, right? That kind of shows this is that same everything I just said, but done in like a pretty little picture. Like, hey, I do this, I do this, I do this. You'll note there's some fun pieces in there. Convert VUM to VLCM. Yeah, I mean that's a part of that process, right? So if I still had some VUM around, I kind of go through each of these steps as their steps is. Anyway, it's a nice way that you can always refer back to, hey, what does that journey look like? And again, back this stuff up by the official documentation, so that way you can kind of see, yeah, but what are the individual steps as I kind of get into that, on page 6,350 or whatever it is. That's not the actual page. I'm just pulling a number out of the air. Now, let's say I was VROPS plus Lifecycle Manager. I'm just going to leave the slide as is, not talk to it too much, because Wesley is absolutely going to talk about this in a little bit. So we'll just say these are the defined steps if I happen to be running vSphere plus Ops and Lifecycle Manager. So again, we're going to, I know Wesley loves to talk about that as I look over that way. And then I've got, that same type of pretty little picture that shows you that journey. But what if I'm vSphere-Only with no VROPS? I would say, what are you doing, man? Right? No. It still has a step. In this particular case, upgrade vCenter to 9, launch the installer, install operations. There's some various steps. You could operationally take this of deploy 18.3 ops and then upgrade that to 9, but it just becomes more nuanced at that point. But if you are truly running what's referred to as a naked environment, that is we can talk. You can definitely, ask your questions in the Q&A and chat on that as well. Or on the YouTube later.
Christopher.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you're on a roll here, but one of the burning questions is, while we're on the topic of vSphere, what about vSphere Perpetual with 8? Are people able to bring that into the fold?
Is that a question in the Q&A or a question in the chat?
It's in the chat, but I think it's
if it can be put
a burning
in the
question
Q&A,
that people
I
want.
have an official answer on it. I just have to pull up
Okay.
the document so that way I'm citing my official answer on it.
Fair
so
enough.
I would love to answer that, but through it being posted to the Q&A.
Yeah, go ahead. Continue.
It is related to that document I just shared in that channel just recently, Brian, but again, I have to read it because I try to say things exactly as they are documented. So no, that is a great question, and I will make sure to answer that in the Q&A. So yeah, this is if we're naked vSphere, that we've got our steps. Let's talk if we're actually running VCF 5.2, these are our steps, right? If we're running all the suite, hey, we update our lifecycle manager, we'll talk about that. We update then ops to 9, we deploy fleet management, we go through these steps, and then suddenly we're importing the stuff we're already using today, and then we're upgrading some of those pieces, right? I imported my automation and I upgraded. I import my Verni and I upgraded. I have my ops for logs. I cannot import it. I must deploy brand new, at which point I can then migrate the data on there. And then VIDB gets deployed as a replacement for VIDM, right? Same kind of thing, a visual journey of that. If we were VCF 5.2 with ops only, it happens, it's true. We kind of follow these steps, very similar to what I just said, just specifically without this piece. I guess in this case, I would actually say, hey, if I didn't have Lifecycle Manager and was ops only, then we just deploy ops 9, you know, and we go forth like we did before. Is this, oh, wish I would have seen that. Anyway, so we've got a few more slides to get through, not to get through, but to kind of go through, but to note, this is what that upgrade process looks like, right? Hey, I'm running ops 8, vCenter 8, you know, I got these pieces. I update my ops to 9. Sweet. And I can leave everything else alone? Yeah. Then I upgrade or deploy a vCenter 9. Yeah, I can do that. And I can leave my host alone? Yeah, sure. Then I can update some of my hosts to 9 or add some 9 hosts in there. Yeah, perfect. This kind of shows what that journey operationally looks like. Same kind of thing, upgrade, right? Is I've got no VROPS. All right, so I deploy VROPS. Okay, and I'm still, everything's the same? Yep. And then I deploy a vCenter 9? Yeah, all right, and I can add some host 9? Yeah. So very similar, but again, through the lens of an upgrade. Similar kind of approach as well, except we decided to upgrade the vCenter first. You can upgrade your vCenter all you want. You still need to deploy ops because the ops becomes your license manager and handler, which we'll talk about in the next couple slides as well. So your vCenter 9 will be in eval mode until it has an ops 9 to talk to. And then I've got all these other pieces that they operate in that way until I get that ops 9 instance running, you know? And that kind of shows you what that journey is. If I upgrade a thing without having ops upgraded in the first place, I run into a weird eval operational state, right? So I like these next 2 slides, which are the last 2 slides, because they kind of depict most of the 99% of the scenarios that I often discuss. You're saying, wait a minute, so you're telling me I can run vCenter 7 inside of this ops environment? Yes. vCenter 7 will be using the keys that you get from your Customer Connect portal, right? But I can't run 8 or 9 hosts. Nope. So you're saying I can run vCenter 8 in there and I can still have my 7 8 hosts? Like, love it. But I can't run a vCenter 9 host. Like, yep, that's the way it's always been. And if I deploy this vCenter 9, which now uses file-based management instead of key-based management, like these 7 and 8, then all my 9 hosts will be using file-based management, and my 8 and 7 will still be using key-based. I'm like, yep, that's true. But I can't deploy vCenter 9 without ops. Yes, that's true. I can't just have naked Verni and NSX running on their own without, like, nope. Anything that has 9 needs VROPS 9 to be its manager and its license manager, as well as, I mean, it's the brains for all other things. And this, you know, just kind of functions on how it kind of works. That all being said, it's my thank you slide, and I'm gonna stop sharing. We're gonna rock and roll and have a good time now. If you guys are good with that, we're starting with Wesley. You got words you want to say? Let me say that. Let's start with you, Wesley.
All right. Well, let me dial in here. Again, so I'm an automation operations specialist. I'm going to try to bring that lens to this. So Christopher has covered, you know, a lot of the basics of the upgrade path, but let's just start to throw out some specifics. When you're going to upgrade ops from 8 to 9, I won't even discuss 7 to 9. Hopefully you're on 8. But if you're doing that, you have 2 options. You can do a local upgrade, which is where you just go to the FQDN/admin screen and you get into your VROPS and it manages the upgrade path, which I found to be the far easier path, but it's not the holistic option. The holistic option would be going through Lifecycle Manager. The problem with going through Lifecycle Manager is you're going to have to download a patch just to upgrade the Lifecycle Manager before it can handle the ops upgrade. You'll also be dealing with content libraries. You'll be dealing with binary injection, or, you know, having to download them off the website, get them into Lifecycle Manager, it's a lot of workflows, a lot of moving parts to use the holistic fashion. And I found it's just more troubleshooting, even for someone who does it regularly. So again, my recommendation is the local upgrade path. I would say it's 2 hours, at least 2 hours faster than going through the Lifecycle Manager path. I think I plan to publish some blogs. I'll probably get them to Christopher and have him distribute them, where I already have this documented in PowerPoints internally, but I need to clean it up for like a more of a public eyes, and so that it makes more sense. But the point is that I'm taking all this stuff through the lab along with other coworkers of mine, and we're sort of conquering, and there's a lot of stuff to conquer. There's a lot of different gotcha moments. And not just in the upgrade paths, but like in trying to figure out how you're going to structure your orgs and like where they're going to live, whether they live at the fleet level, whether they live at the VP or the the instance level, whether they live at a vCenter level, a lot of different layers of abstraction where you can build these things out on. And if you want, Christopher, I can share some slides on it, but it might take us down a rabbit hole to go there.
You can go down a small rabbit hole. I mean,
All right. That's my invitation to go down a rabbit hole.
but remember, Don also wants to talk at some point.
Right.
Just small rabbits, you know, a little
Small.
check, you know, a little
All
Mad
right.
Hatter is okay.
Okay. I'm gonna bring up a little diagram here to illustrate some complexities. So let's start sharing. Right. And all right. So here's our basic VCF architecture. We got the fleet level, we got the instance level, the VCF instance. So in this diagram, I have two different VCF instances, 1 and 2. Here, I'm supposing that VCF instance 1 is dedicated to a New York City data center, and then I got one in Jersey City across the way. So in other words, we're not dealing with any latency requirements that might break some of these appliances being able to talk to each other. Now, just talking from a VCF architecture point of view, not from a automation point of view. We'll cover that in just a second. But what we've done here is we've deployed a management domain, which is where the ops, the logs, and the auto are going to live. Now, you only need one instance of those to govern multiple VCF instances. So I don't need to have an ops, logs, and an auto also in VCF instance 2. I have a management domain, and I have a vCenter, and I have an NSX, but I don't have another ops, logs, and auto in this VCF instance 2. So in other words, one ops, logs, auto per fleet can govern it all. Now, covering it from an automation angle. So in Automation 9, you can set up different orgs. This is for the sake of segmenting by different business units, or this could be segmenting by different teams. It all depends. But when you go to set up an org, you can set them up so that each org has its own workload domain. You can set it up so that all your orgs live on one right here, where orgs 1, 2, and 3 all live on the management domain in VCF instance 1. So it's up to you. You know, this is all about whether you want hard or soft isolation, you know, at the host level, at the vCenter level. You can do it all the way to the fleet level, to where you have a fleet managing just one org, or you can have multiple orgs inside of one fleet. But the main parts to the puzzle that you want to understand is that this one ops, log, auto lives inside the entire fleet. You can have consolidated architecture where you have your workload and your management living inside of one vCenter. And I can also have a second instance down here where I have a little bit of mixture between management domains and workload domains. Something else to consider is that with NSX, I can have one NSX serving multiple workload domains versus, you know, up here, or I could have one NSX per workload domain. Obviously, it's more stuff to manage, but you know, there are reasons for having more NSX or having more vCenters involved, because it depends on the kind of traffic that's coming through them. And again, it also depends on, you know, the isolation concerns you might have. Do you need orgs being able to share the same interface, being able to share the same network segmentation, that type of thing? So I'll stop there, and let me just stop sharing so we don't, you know, get beleaguered on this particular architecture. But feel free to throw questions in. And Christopher, if you can, just bring them up to me if I don't have my eye on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to give this a chance, because we all go through many challenges. I want one thing I want to address, one thing we won't be talking about today, but I will have in a future article when I can, will be, obviously we mentioned VxRail. We'll address it when we can, when we have official guidance. And one that popped up inside that other polling question was Nutanix, which I'll address in an article when I can, when I've got proper direction and guidance on it. But Don, talk to us, man. What are some of the challenges that you're looking at it? Because you're looking at it through the lens of not I've got an environment I want to do this to, but I have regulatory governance compliance. I want to know, Don works, where do you work, Don? Do you work for Horrocks Cancer Research Centers, or do you
No, my name is not
you
on the
work for
door,
a
sir.
company
No,
that pays you money, right?
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like many of you, you may face this. I want to do a thing, but I can't do a thing because we've got rules we need to follow. And I'm going to shut up and let Don talk about the kind of challenges he faces going through this.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, at Moffitt Cancer Center, obviously, we're a healthcare organization and we're constrained by PHI, compliance and regulatory requirements. And so we're looking at this as an opportunity to modernize our entire design. Like I mentioned, we're a traditional vSphere environment today. We considered VCF probably 6-ish years ago. And I would say the only couple of things that we adopted from that level of design is we incorporated NSX into our environment. And yes, we went through the V to T migration, went through that. And we also have what we'll call a management domain or a management cluster today in our traditional vSphere environment. And that's where our vCenters live, operations, automation, all those great tools. And so we're looking at VCF and especially VCF9 and saying this is an opportunity potentially to go into a Greenfield deployment. And how do we want to lay things out differently? We're able to not only align better to the VCF9 guidance, but also take lessons learned from the past. And this is an opportunity to modernize. So, maybe that's a great time to say, let's segregate our production and non-production workloads. That sounds like a great idea. Is it feasible with licensing and costs and all that? It's something that has to be discussed internally and planned accordingly, right? But to separate production and non-production itself, that's a great thing, and it's important for network segmentation if you have that as an initiative as well. It's going to make your environment more resilient, more secure, obviously. And even a level beneath production and non-production separation is lines of business, which you heard Wesley and Christopher mention earlier. And maybe you want to have an org for my finance line of business versus my clinical line of business, and how can we keep their workloads separate, keep them on different network segments, different hosts altogether, all those things, so they're not contending for resources like they are today, right? And they're on potentially separate network segments with if you're using NSX, especially with proper controls to ensure that there's not traffic talking between them unless it's absolutely necessary, right? So we're looking at this as a great opportunity to rethink a lot of aspects in our environment and try to correct some of those issues that we've noticed over the years that we can address some of these over time, onesie twosie, but if you're going to go into a greenfield environment, do the right thing up front, and it'll pay off later. So we're very much looking into that now and designing, not in a whiteboard session per se, but in a diagramming session perhaps. What does the future look like for us, and where can VCF9 take us? Perhaps in a more efficient and streamlined approach than VCF 5.2, especially when you look at, like Christopher was mentioning before, you have what used to be the cloud builder is now transitioning into the installer, right? And so you used to have a really large Excel spreadsheet or a JSON file, if that's the way you prefer to interact with it. And that was your means of deploying VCF. And now you're going to have this installer, which if you still prefer to upload a JSON file, I believe that is entirely possible. But it's a much more wizard-driven approach. And it's a lot more friendly for those of us who haven't deployed VCF on a regular basis. It's a much less intimidating and complex option to get your feet wet with VCF. I'll take a pause and see if Christopher has any questions or anywhere you want to go with that?
I do have places I want to go with that.
Let's go. Buckle up.
So, uh, uh,
Choices, I know.
you don't face many or any of the major operational constraints like that we see within the product itself, right? Because you don't have any VxRail, or do you have VxRail? I mean, I guess I'll pose that as or I'd say if you have any of those type of constraints, those things let's talk a little about that. Let's talk about CPU compatibility, right? Let's talk about
Sure.
hardware compatibility. Share with us your experience, because that's something we talked about yesterday, right? Which was, what's our favorite friend when it comes to hardware and software? It was the compatibility guide, right?
That's
I think
exactly
it's
right.
compatibilityguide.broadcom.com, I think is what it is. I'll go confirm that. But yeah, like, talk to us about your life cycle experience of using that as a tool to go and make sure I want to do thing, but can I do thing? Am I supported for thing? And what are the nuances you need to account for? I remember we were discussing certain parts that we expect the vendor to do, Dell,
Sure.
Lenovo, HP, other things we expect the backup vendor to do, Veeam, Cohesity, Rubrik, Commvault, etc., right?
Yeah. So you have to take that holistic look at your environment and say, especially if you're going to make a investment in new hardware, or bringing over hardware from another environment, whatever your approach is going to be, you want to make sure that the hardware is, of course, compatible. And so, number one on everyone's mind is CPU, right? Is the Intel Skylake generation compatible? Maybe not, versus some of the latest generation. Same goes for even down to sometimes SSDs and NVMe drives. You want to make sure that you're bringing in hardware that's compatible. You're not setting yourself up for failure. Part of what we discussed yesterday was, to your point about software and Dell, Lenovo, and those platform developers. You want to make sure that even down to your backup software, is your backup solution compatible with VCF9? It's a very fair question. VCF9 is obviously very fresh. Released only, I believe, a couple months ago now to GA. And the Broadcom compatibility guide does not track the software aspect of third-party solutions. Back in when it was the VMware HCL, that may have been tracked to some degree, but you'll no longer see the big backup players, Rubrik, Cohesity, Veeam. The Broadcom compatibility guide defers the status of product compatibility to the developer. And so if you want to know if Rubrik, your whatever version of Rubrik you're on today, is compatible with VCF9, the guidance is to defer to Rubrik and their documentation to see if perhaps you need to make an upgrade or there's a patch you need to apply, that sort of thing. Of course, any hardware you want to implement, we were talking about CPUs, I mentioned NVMe drives. There's important considerations throughout the entire stack. So if you look at the Broadcom compatibility guide, you can drill down to, is the component that you want to validate, is it a CPU? Okay, great. Here's the form that you can search by model number or any number of filters. And that's recommended for as much as you know about your environment. And don't leave any stone unturned, because as we mentioned, sometimes it's the software, like backup software. That would be an embarrassing one to miss and not realize until you're already implemented on 9 that it's not compatible, right?
That is a problem I face, not a 9 issue. Not almost even an 8 issue sometimes. It's sometimes I'll find like, oh yeah, I can't upgrade from 7 to 8. I'm like, you got like 58 days remaining. Yeah, I can't do it because my backup vendor doesn't support 8.03 or something along those lines. If you don't support 8.03, you don't support 9. And I don't have an answer for that. I mean, it's like, well, maybe they update. I just don't have a good answer for it, but that's something you need to acknowledge and recognize as you look at, the pieces that run in your environment are those pieces supported on what is available today? Are the pieces I'm running supported, right? Are you running, hey, my CPU may not be supported by 9, but also that hardware is probably gray market on third or fifth party support, and probably is deprecated with 6 cores per CPU or something along those lines, right? So there may be other inefficiencies that may be operating in there anyway. So it's not something we can answer for all of the things at all times. We're just trying to do the best we can to give you a path to get where you want to get to, and making sure that, we minimize as many roadblocks along the way, making sure you're compatible hardware, compatible software, and it makes these things, viable and operational, right? Because I certainly wouldn't want you to run on a system that only has 6 core per CPU, because that thing is not running efficiently. Let's just say, right?
No,
It's not
not
gonna
at all.
nearly achieve as much as there are. I don't know what the maximum of cores per CPU on a single CPU is these days, but I certainly know that vSphere-9 supports 960 vCPUs in a single VM. So it tells me there's probably more than 6 cores, probably more than 64 cores in some cases. Wesley, you've been quiet for a little bit, but you've been seeing a lot of the Q&A, a lot of the chat,
Yep.
other stuff that you love, you want to talk about. I know you're like, Christopher, can I demo like automation stuff? I'm like, oh, you know what? You do whatever you want, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to address some of the questions, the outstanding questions here. We'll just go down the rows. But somebody's asking here with 8.18 VRA multi-tenancy, how it migrates to all apps. This seems to be like a recurring thing. People want to know, is there an easy button? Does it just, when I upgrade, am I able to keep my architecture in place? Not really. The thing is that
it's true, right? Not really. It's the right answer.
the thing about VRA 8 was that you manage tenancy through projects. You can still do that in the 9 version, but keep in mind that the 9 version is 2 different versions. We got VM apps, which is the classic, that's VRA 8. And then you got all apps, which is the new stuff. The new stuff with all that org architecture didn't exist in VRA 8. So there's going to be no way for that to migrate from 8 to 9. It's just new constructs. Now, of course, you can keep your general tree structure in place, but you're going to have to rebuild it. Not a big lift, I don't think. Somebody else is asking, is there a way to easily migrate from IDM to IDB? The identity broker, nope, there's no easy way. You have to reset it up. But
and I want to touch on that is also because we discussed this the other day, right? If I deploy vCenter 9, which deploys an embedded VIDB, if I wanted to then use ops to deploy the HA version, a 3-node version of the VIDB, can I then migrate that embedded VIDB over to the 3-node VIDB? The answer, no. Also,
right.
There's
no easy way.
Right. And that's it. It's neither right nor wrong. It's true, right? It's like, well, I don't like that answer. Like, well, that is the answer. So at least hey, this is what the step looks like. So no VIDM to VIDB and no VIDB embedded to VIDB HA. It lets you be prepared for it. And there's not a lot of configuration anyway. So once you set it up, you're kind of one and done. But still, just knowing the nuance of how you adopt and adapt these certain parts, that become integral as part of your, SSO and lifecycle and other pieces like that.
Yeah, and then somebody else asked, can we migrate hard tenants to soft and vice versa? Seems like a big question. The easy answer is no. Again, you're going to keep your architecture in place, but it has to be rerouted or rebuilt using the now existing architecture. So I'll give another example of that. So in automation, there's this concept known as regions. And I should say in automation's all apps, but when I say, and I'll just call it VCF-A, which kind of covers the new automation. So there's a whole nother construct in VCF-A called provider. It's kind of like this global administrator of the orgs, which didn't exist at all in VRA8. It's a whole new GUI. So in this GUI, you set up things like region, which can be, which builds off of supervisor namespaces, which is kind of a Kubernetes construct, but we're incorporating the Kubernetes constructs into VCFA. It used to sort of be available in CCI, Cloud Consumption Interface, and 8, but it was never really built as the central, the front door. And now it is. It's front and center, all this Kubernetes style architecture. So namespaces are front and center. So instead of using resource groups to logically group stuff, we're using namespaces to logically group stuff. And instead of using, and we're using this thing called quotas, or not quotas, regions. So the point is that if you want to migrate anything, it's gonna have to organize itself to these new constructs. So there's no easy way to migrate anything. Some of these questions are a bit longer. I'll try to answer.
I'm typing the answer for the Business Services Council site ID question, so you can proceed beyond
okay.
that.
As far as why there's no org ID name in the URL, anyone who's used to using VRA understands oftentimes you got to go to the URL to sort of grab stuff from there, and either to put it into some blueprint to automate something or whatever. Some of these are just works in progress. I'm sure we're going to be submitting feedback, and the product managers will figure out some way to make it workable. So having said all of that, let's just pull back again, having answered some of those questions. Let me touch on logs real quick. So we touched on Lifecycle Manager, touched on automation. Logs, one of the big things that people are mentioning is that you can only, the ops, when you are using ops to sort of lifecycle manage this upgrade to logs, there's only one option to pull in 90 days worth of logs. Just know that, yes, that is the only native way to bring in the logs, but you can always use the log exporter in logs 8 to get all the logs that you want off of some tagging or filtering mechanism. Take out 7 years of logs that have this tag or this keyword. After you export them into a file, you can bring them into the new logs. And to do that at scale, you can utilize a Python module script to stream them via UDP. And build it using your favorite GPT engine, but it's not that big of a deal. I've tested that, and all the logs get in there. They come through the front door, which means they get repartitioned with all the different time to live rules that you want for every different partition. So little bow tie on what I've learned from labbing this stuff. We've yet to run into any problem where it's a dead end. There's always a workaround, and it's not that big of a workaround either. Oftentimes the optimization process is just, if I were to do it over again, yeah, I could save myself 3 or 4 hours. I'm not saving myself 3 or 4 weeks. It's not that big of a.
And I'm going to speak to logs a little bit as well. If you are using logs for operational integrity visibility, and you're only keeping it for 30, 60, 90 days or something along those lines, and are not using it for governance, compliance, I've got a partition locked out for 7 years, whatever. So if you're not using it for those type of conditions, I always typically encourage, hey, keep that system around until that stuff would have normally aged out. And you just have it there available. That way you're able to keep that, like, we would do the same thing when I would do an update from a version of ops to another version of ops when I couldn't, do that family thing. So like when I've done that brief bucket time when we went to SaaS, keep the old run around to keep metric coherency, and then wait for the data to effectively age out. So if you don't need to maintain that data inside of logs for that period of time, just leave that system around long enough to where it would have technically no longer be relevant. That's typically how I would just treat that log type of data. Otherwise, you've got other mechanisms in addition to the import and forwarding and so on and so forth, but forwarding, exporting. But regardless, is if logs are being used for operational log integrity, they maintain the relevance for the time frame that they happen to have. So logs shouldn't be an issue with it being a new deploy. And I'll note, for those who have used logs and have, let me just restate that. For those who have used logs, what I mean by that is 18 times 4 equals 72 terabytes. Where you are using all 72 terabytes across those 18 nodes, know that adopting 9 goes to 18 times 6, which I think is 100, whatever 18 times 6 is, because now you get 6 terabytes per node. So you can do a lot more capacity inside that same footprint now. Let's see. So we've got our last few questions done. Any closing remarks, anything you've learned between today, even yesterday when we were talking through some of this stuff, other pieces that you may want to share for those who are going through the same journey that you also operationally are going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I wish I had a long enough, notepad here to write all the things down, to be honest. But um, learned a lot about the strategy to move forward with Ops 9, because traditionally, if you didn't have a license key for operations next version, how are you going to deploy that next version or upgrade to it and remain licensed? It's kind of a, in my mind, it's something I have to wrap my head around. And you have a great article about what licensing looks like in 9, and especially, as you upgrade or deploy a new operations 9 instance, how does it get licensed? Because I don't have spare licenses around for me to say, oh, let me upgrade a host or a vCenter to 9 and then deploy operations 9. And that's not necessary with the new license model for VCF 9. So that's refreshing, because that was something that I was going in circles in my head about, because it's not the same approach that we knew historically.
In the vSphere 7, vSphere 8, vSphere 8.0U3, right? Hey, I got a key, I need to downgrade that key, and then I need to downgrade that key again. Oh, I've upgraded that system, I now need to upgrade that key. Yeah, all that operationally goes. It still lives in the 7.8 world. Absolutely. It's still out there.
That's exactly right.
You still got to downgrade those 8.03 keys to 8.02 and downgrade them to 7, or upgrade that key to 7, etc. That's a real world that still exists, but in 9, it all goes away in favor of files. And I will say, if you've got questions about licensing, if you got something, A, ask your accountant team. B, I mean, read my articles I have in LinkedIn, ask a question on there. Don't get your answers about how licensing works from Reddit, because you will be misguided, and it's okay. I don't go to Reddit. And it's also because I've never had anyone argue that what I'm saying in any of my articles is wrong, because I make sure everything I'm sharing is correct in those. But if you've got questions you're wondering, yeah, reach out to the content, shoot me an email, post a question there in the LinkedIn articles, because the key here is for you to walk away from this educated without an agenda, as opposed to whatever random Reddit thread may happen. We've got Wesley, we got like a minute. We got a minute left. What do you thoughts, last remarks? I want to thank everybody for your amazing questions in the Q&A and the chat. There's still so much to go through and ingest on this, but this absolutely you guys make the event, so I absolutely do appreciate that. But Wesley, why don't you bring us out?
I would just say the hands-on labs. When I first came to VMware and saw these thinking labs, they're free. They're fairly well apportioned, fairly well configured right out of the box. But you can see VCFA, you can see logs, you can see it all in there, and just click around. It's the only way I've learned this stuff. Reading the docs is a spaghetti nightmare. You got to click in some labs.
Well, and I will. The last piece is Chad dropped a link to the hands-on labs. Perfect. Simon dropped a YouTube video from a VMUG session on licensing. Also perfect. There is no shortage of information. If you've seen the VCF 9 guide that launched at 8,108 pages and then went to 8445, and now it's like 82 something. We are trying to get all of the data in your hands at your fingertips, so that way you'll be educated and informed in order to make those right decisions for you. It's not about, hey, go figure it out on the web. It's like, here's everything, and it may feel like it's a lot, but the reality is we want to make sure you have everything at your fingertips and exposed to you. I want to thank you guys all for coming. We're at time. We're at good. This has been a great session for you all. I'm going to stop the recording and I'm going to end the session for it all, but I hope this was good for you all. Definitely feel free to fill out the post-survey thing, and we'll figure out what the next month's session is going to be. By then, I will hopefully have a new baby, so we'll see how it looks. Have you guys a wonderful August and a wonderful Explore if you're attending.
Take care.